Grazie, buongiorno a tutti, sono Stefano Bessetti, responsabile commerciale di Aginvest SGR, sono qui a Milano, ringrazio Erik per la disponibilità, in particolare Erik e Lorenzo. Erik è in Sudafrica in questo momento, Lorenzo ci parlerà poi finito l'intervento di Erik dal suo ufficio di New York. Come sapete abbiamo organizzato una serie di conference call partendo dai nostri fondi multimanager passando a quelli single manager. Oggi appunto ne sentiamo 2 dei 4 comparti single manager, mentre lunedì sarà la volta di Numene e Principia. Come al solito ci sarà poi un momento di domande, sia finito l'intervento di Erik, inizierà poi dopo una breve pausa Lorenzo o se volete mandarcele per email durante la conference call, per noi è un momento per poi girarle direttamente ai gestori. Grazie, ringrazio Erik. Erik, are you live? Can you go ahead?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you so much, Erik.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us on Wednesday afternoon. I'm down in Cape Town, South Africa, so maybe excuse the difficult connection. I want to thank everybody for their support of the fund. I know it's been a difficult year. We were down in the beginning of the year, had some good performance in June and July, and then gave a lot of that back in August. I just want to first give people a little update on some of the things that happened in August, and maybe it'll give everybody some color on the markets in Africa. And then I think we'll talk about the things we're excited about and how we plan to make money going forward. I think the first 3 things that were challenges in August were, one, we had a very surprising change in banking regulations in Kenya. We had some very high-quality banks in Kenya, but there were some changes to the rules about how much banks can charge for loans in Kenya. The government lowered the rate substantially and actually made a law forcing banks to pay more to depositors. So it had a big effect on the expected earnings of these banks. And so that was a big, they had a very big sell-off in August, but there may actually be an opportunity in this exact sector in the future. There was also a pretty sharp sell-off in the South African rand. South Africa is in a bit of a difficult position. They're being reviewed by S&P. And there was a lot of negativity. There was a kind of a political attack on the finance minister, and he's a very important person to instilling confidence in the South African currency and the South African economy. And he's the S&P, the rating agencies like him a lot, and he's under attack by the president here. So it was a bit of a precarious situation. The rand sold off quite a bit, and we thought it was prudent to reduce our exposure, especially in some of the banks in South Africa where we had some positions. And the third thing that sold off quite a bit in August were our positions in the gold miners. So those 3 sectors, the South African stocks have rebounded a little bit, but I'm still a bit wary, cautious about that. But that's where we were, and the Kenyan banks haven't really moved much yet. I think so. Just to kind of give a little bit of color about some of the volatility in the recent results, but then maybe I'd like to go over some of the markets and what we see as the opportunities, and maybe it gets you to understand or hear about some of the different sectors in Africa and what's going on. We'll just start from the top in Egypt. A lot of interesting stocks there, and we were making some money in Egypt. But right now, there's the market's a little bit on hold. Egypt is waiting for a large $12 billion loan from the IMF to help them with their budget. But until the agreement is that Egypt has to devalue their currency substantially in order to get the money, and it would probably be about a 30% devaluation. So we had some positions in Egypt, but I'm staying. I reduced them, sold them, and I think we'll probably revisit them after this big move in the currency. The government has been preparing the citizens that prices are probably going to be going up for food and that there will be inflation because the currency is going to be devalued. But there are some opportunities once this has happened. I was in Nigeria last week. Very interesting place. It's under a lot of stress right now. These are some problems that have built up over time. And also they're struggling with the low oil price. I think there's some stuff to do there. I think there's some interesting opportunities in the stock market, maybe in the cement sector, and also maybe with local Nigerian bonds, although I would like to see an improvement in the liquidity in the currency. It's the government. I don't think the currency is fully devalued to where it needs to go. It's about 320 naira to the dollar, but the black market's around 400. So that's probably another further 25% devaluation in the currency, and I'd like to see that happen. The central bank has been trying to resist that happening, and but all the market participants know the currency has to weaken, and so there's been very little liquidity in the Nigerian currency, and I'm just very careful that I don't want us to get involved. I want to be careful, make sure there's lots of liquidity that we can get in and out of stuff easily. So Nigeria is exciting. The market has sold off substantially. Interest rates are very high. We may be able to make 15, 16% on local currency bonds in Nigeria, but I'm not sure the timing is just right now. A third market is Kenya, where I discussed what happened with the banks. So very, very big change to the banking regulations. But I met with two Kenyan banks just yesterday down here in Cape Town, and they've got a plan to try and replace these earnings, grow the loans, grow their loan book to offset the reduced margins, and cut some costs and increase fees, and they may be able to make back a lot of what the market thinks they won't. May be able to keep earnings flat to growing, which would be, given where the share prices are, that would be a big positive surprise. So there may actually be an opportunity in the Kenyan banks. Excuse me. One other sector which is surprisingly I'm getting much more interested in, which is surprising for me, is the commodity sector. I'm especially interested in the gold mining stocks. This also applies to the big mining companies, diversified mining companies, that copper and coal and iron ore. These companies have been reducing costs substantially. They've been canceling projects, canceling new mines, reducing all their spending, and now they've also benefited from the weakness in emerging market currencies because their costs are based in local currencies such as Zambia or South Africa, South African rand, and they're now starting to generate a lot of free cash flow. I used to be very negative on this sector. They had they had no free cash flow. They were spending too much money. Debt was going up. And now actually you're seeing the opposite. You're seeing most of these stocks, the gold miners, some of the big diversified miners like Glencore, Anglo American, they're generating about 10% free cash flow. So that's operating cash flow after all their investment in new mines. So they really are, if you and I own these businesses privately, they're generating 10% free cash flow and using it to pay down debt. They're not paying dividends right now, but it looks like by next year they should be, and I think that'll be a big positive for the market. I think a lot of investors, and are skeptical on this sector. It's bounced a lot this year, and I think everyone thinks it's just a bounce, and they're skeptical that the earnings will continue to improve and that commodities will continue to do well. I think two things. I think one, these companies are starting to prove that there may be an earnings story here that does not require substantially higher commodity prices. They're doing very good. I think they're going to they can continue to improve on cutting costs and keeping CapEx lower. I met with a major mining company yesterday, and they're planning to reduce their capital expenditure budget even further next year. So these might be there might still be things these guys can do internally to generate cash flows. And second, the commodity sector expectations that these prices should come down. Coking coal, which is used in the making of steel, hit I think the highest level in 5 or 6 years. It's over $200 a ton. I think it should come down, but zinc is doing well, gold is acting well, silver is acting well. Iron ore's been over $50 a ton all year. With these low cost bases, these are pretty good prices. And so, we're still seeing very strong demand out of China. And so I am, surprisingly for me, I'm finding, I'm at a conference down here in Cape Town, and I'm meeting with lots of companies. And surprisingly, the mining companies seem to have the best. They seem to have the best meetings. So I think there's about 20 to 30% upside to the commodity stocks, even if commodity prices don't move. But I think we could be looking at over 50% upside if there's any further improvement in the commodity prices. And so one last thing I'd like to discuss are the African bond markets. There are very high yields on local currency bonds in Africa, from 15 to, so let's say 12 to 18% on local currency bonds. That is something we're looking at. It might be nice to have a portion of the portfolio invested in African bonds with pretty good yields. Another option, which is a little lower risk, is there's a growing market of U.S. dollar African government bonds. So, for example, there are U.S. dollar bonds for Kenya, Ethiopia, Ghana, Zambia, Nigeria, and so they're government bonds, and they yield about 7 to 9% in dollars. So it's that might be. I'm interested in those as well. It might be nice to have some relatively high yields in dollars from these African countries, and these yields compare very well compared to other emerging markets. Dollar bonds across the world, usually 2 to 3%. I think Brazil might be 4%. So 7 to 9 is very high. So we've had a tough year so far, but I'm definitely focused on improving things from here and looking at ideas. And I think we can make some money in the commodity space and maybe add some yield through some of the African bonds. So, Stefano, I'm not sure if you think there's anything to add or if people have questions.
Okay.
Excuse me, this is the Chorus Call conference operator. We will now begin the question and answer session. Anyone who has a question may press star and 1 at this time.
Erik, in meantime, I have a question for you from an investor. Are you seeing the same level of investment from China towards Africa at the moment? Less, same, more?
Good question, Stefano. It's very high. I'd say it's growing. But it's changing. The nature of the investment is changing. They used to invest, over maybe the last 10 to 15 years. It's been a lot of investment in commodities, and now that investment has changed to infrastructure. They are financing the building of new airports, new railroads, harbors, trying to think, power plants. So a lot of these are big infrastructure investments. Chinese companies usually come in and do the construction, and so it's funded by China, financed by China, built by China, but it's a little different than the older previous investment cycle, which was into the commodity sector. This one is very much about improving infrastructure in Africa and actually opening up African markets to China. They're trying to improve the ports and trying to improve the ability to trade with Africa. And to do that, you need better roads, you need ports, you need airports, and so this stuff is happening. It's quite positive. These things were not happening without China, and it's part of their One Belt, One Road strategy. So this is So the commitment to Africa is still there from China. Thank you.
Okay. Another question from investor. Are you analyzing the sector of bonds, or do you have position in bonds at the moment? Or just studying the bond markets in Africa, or you both?
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Erik, can you hear me? Erik, can you hear me?
Mr. Renander, your line is open.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question, Stefano.
The question about the bond market. If you have position in bond market at the moment, or
no, we don't have a position at the moment. We're just doing work on it.
Okay. And a question about net exposure. What is the net exposure of the funds at the moment? In August was more or less negative 12%, correct? And now?
Yes. Now it's slightly positive, but it's still quite low at the moment. But we are building our exposure a little bit in the commodity sector right now. But it's positive, but it's still low.
Okay. Other question, please.
Mr. Renander, Mr. Vestetti, there are no questions registered at this time.
Stefano, maybe I'll make one final
absolutely.
Observation. Yeah. I see it's a very difficult time across Africa, from Egypt, where they probably have to devalue their currency. Same thing in Nigeria. Zimbabwe is going through some difficulties, South Africa. But actually these difficulties are good in that they're forcing a lot of changes through they're forcing governments to balance budgets, reform sectors, change the ministers, get new people in, be more investor friendly. They're having to, like Egypt, for example, has to follow IMF, guidelines for how to improve their country. Nigeria is probably going to have to do the same thing. Zimbabwe is going to do this. So this actually, if you look back to 1995, which was one of the best times to invest in Africa, it was most of the countries had run into financing difficulties and were had to improve and reform their economies because the IMF had imposed changes on how they operated. And I think actually this is it's a very difficult out there. It doesn't look great, but actually I think there's it's tough medicine, but it's actually improving the fundamentals of the country for the longer term. So I want to be careful with our funds and make sure we get the right things and make money and be, find the right investments. But I just also don't want to scare people away by saying that some of these, what's happening right now in Africa is actually very good longer term, and it's going to generate some good opportunities. We just want to make sure we're there with liquidity that's good and make sure the fund is liquid and we find good, safe investments. But yeah, no, I'm excited, and I think it's strange, but I think the commodity sector might be quite interesting, and especially the opportunities on euro-dollar bonds. Thank you, Stefano.
Thank you, Erik. A question about the net exposure. Are you trying to stabilize the net exposure of the funds, or it depends on what are you seeing on the markets?
Yeah, I'm a little bit. I was just a little bit cautious on the market in the very near term, but and also some ideas that we had which changed our view on it with Kenya, but it was mostly just being careful about the market, but also looking for new ideas. And while we were looking for new ideas, I just wanted to keep the exposure low. But I think we're finding some exciting stuff where we can make money, so the exposure will go higher.
Okay. Other question from
As a reminder, if you wish to register for a question, please press star and 1 on your telephone.
A question about liquidity we received. What about the liquidity of the funds? Could be a problem in case of a big crisis in US and Europe, the liquidity of the funds?
No, the fund is very liquid right now. It's probably too liquid. So we could everything is we could probably don't have any trouble getting out of any of our stocks. It's I think most of the positions we could get out of in 1 or 2 days.
And a question about correlation of Africa and other markets. At the moment, the correlation is very low. What do you think for the future, the correlation of the main markets in Africa and, for example, the European markets and the US market?
I think the South African market has a bit more correlation to Europe and the U.S., but the Kenyan market, the Nigerian market, and the Egyptian market seem to have very low correlation to the rest of the both markets.
Okay. Ok, grazie a tutti, thank you Erik. Erik poi è sempre a disposizione, se avete altre domande scrivete a me, a Raina o a Michela, saranno girate prontamente a Erik. Ci sentiamo poi per la conference call di Lorenzo intorno alle 5. Grazie Erik, thank you Erik, thank you so much. Thank you, bye bye.